the dairy industry today. The blue line tells you that people get more and more cows per farm, and the red line says that the number of farms is highly decreasing. In Denmark, it decreased from 10,000 in 2000 down to around 3,000 now in 2020. So there's a highly reduction in farm numbers, but a high increase in cow numbers. This is worldwide, although there are different areas. You can have in Saudi, as we heard, you might have farms of more than 100,000 cows. When in California, you have 5 to 10,000 cows. And in the east of USA, you might only have less than 100 cows. And in Norway, they might have only 35 cows per farm. And in some South American farms living close to equator, you might only have 2 to 20 cows per farm. So very different, but it is increasing and the farm number is decreasing. These are data from Denmark. We have a lot of milking machine, automatic milking machine milking, 20%, 25%. Organic will be also in some areas increasing in the industrial part of the world. Milking, if you have a milking red and cow, Holstein cow, red and white, a Holstein cow, it will produce 10,000 liter of milk or 40,000, depending on how many times you milk it per day, or even 20,000 liter for the really good ones. In the low industrial areas where you do a lot of grazing, you might have only 5,000 liters per cow, but they will milk these cows. And then the somatic cell count is around 200,000 in many areas, which will be normal. Mastitis is around 20-30%. You might have problem farms with 100%. All cows get mastitis every year. And you might also have very good farms with only 5% mastitis every year. And then you have dry cow therapy around 30-40%, and in some areas you simply tube all cows with dry cow therapy. But this is a focus area, the amount of antibiotics. Yield is increasing over time, also very, very high, and it's every year, and it continues to increase. Somatic cell counts go down. So it was 400,000. Now it's down to 200,000 in most areas, and in the good farms you are less than 100,000. Cows are clean and good animal welfare. It could be a part of a farm in Saudi or California on sand. If you have a good cubicle, the iron around the cow, if it's perfect, adjusted, and you have sand, then it's a really good environment, clean and nice, and the cows are really like it and have a very, very good animal welfare. But you can also have cows on pasture, and actually in those areas you might see sometimes that when it's raining, that you have shitty areas, and then you have other problems. So it's not that all cows on pasture are healthy. And on the other hand, you might also have housing facilities that are not good for the cows, and then you have really bad animal welfare. Some areas you need to use mattresses if you don't have sand enough. Big farms in Denmark is 500 cows. And as I told you, in California, 5,000, 10,000 in Texas, and also in Mexico, Turkey, and in the Middle East, you will see farms really, really big, up to 50 to 100,000. China, many farms, 3, 4, 5, 10,000. Milking parlors in most areas. If you have really many cows, that's how you do it. they milk 24 hours in these parlors, and then they have 1 hour of cleaning. And but sometimes the communication is not so good, that you have people with another language. In Europe, many people come from East Europe and work in the West, and there can be some language problem. In US, you might have Mexicans working, and in other areas you might have labor coming from outside. So it is important that they know when the cows are infected, when they have mastitis. It can be difficult to see if you don't have hands-on as a manager. So there are also, for the robots, there are ways to use automatic sensors to see if an alarm on the volume of milk produced, and conductivity, and also some light, can give you an indication of a mastitis alarm in the milk. But first of all, you have to inspect the milk. That is also a very good way to detect mastitis. If you want to use antibiotics, or of the antibiotic used for cows in many countries, actually 70% is used for mastitis or for other infections. So if you can have better udder health, less mastitis, good milk quality, the amount of antibiotics that you use can be really heavily reduced on all the cow population. You can also focus on single or narrow spectrum antibiotics. Most of the bacteria that is found in mastitis is actually gram positives, and they are highly sensitive to penicillin. We do have a beta-lactamase test in our qPCR, but it is oh, sorry, I did not put off my cell phone. These narrow spectrum antibiotics do have a very nice cure rate for these gram-positive bacteria. Actually, also for the ones that are beta-lactamase positive, even Staph aureus, that is penicillin resistant, will have a cure rate of 20% with penicillin. And if you shoot it with some of the fancy drugs, tetracycline, chlorphenicol, fluorophenical, and some of the other sulfatrim and antibiotics that you can fluorophenicols, you will sometimes also get the same cure rate of 20%. So even though you make sometimes people will blame you that we don't have a very broad spectrum antibiogram telling you that this bacteria is sensitive to this and this and this and this bacteria antibiotic. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much as long as you know the bug. You know exactly what to do about it. You know that you have to treat with narrow spectrum penicillin for the gram positives and the gram negatives. In many cases, they have cured themselves, and most of all, they need fluid therapy. For Klebsiellas, you might have another problem, but then again, if you know the bug, you know how to treat it. Every farmer knows that mastitis costs money because it reduces the yield. If the somatic cell count on the x-axis, if it goes up to 4,000 to 5,000 cells in a cow, then you lose money, 2, 3, 4 liters every day on such cows. So mastitis costs milk production. This is shown a lot of times. This is from Untersuchung. That's now the head of Gesundheitsdienst in Deventer. from 2009, but here you can see that Strep Agalactia and Streptococcus and Staph aureus, it costs money. They lose milk. Sometimes there's a lot of focus on the CNS, but actually in many cases these cows produce more milk, and that's just how it is. So what should you use for injection to get rid of the CNS? Well, why do injections when they produce good and more milk? You don't need to treat them. Sorry for the jumping here, but they were perfect. But now they jump on the screen. Here, this is a test that we did. The same issue. Agalactia cows produce 4 liters less. Staph aureus cows for 3.5, and if they have a mixed infection, actually 5 liters. This was cows that we tested in October and found that they were infected. And then we went back and looked at the milk yield for the last half year, and these cows have been producing 4 liters less every day the last half a year. So it costs money. Mastitis reduce milk yield. When you know the bugs, you can also start to do farm-specific prevention plans. You can survey the bulk tank, and then you can follow the contagious mastitis pathogens. We have a kit for mastite M4E that only detects these 4 targets, and it's very good for bulk tank screening. It can be weekly in the big farms, or even every day, or it could be every month in the smaller farms. But those of you that have been in contact with big farms, you know that they focus a lot on Mycoplasma bovis, and they really want to know how is the situation. Do we need to test further into the cows to get rid of the positives and do some segregation? Data that you can get from different issues is also a way to do a mastitis prevention plan. You can number of treatments, the cultures or the PCR results, and then the DHI results, the somatic cell count. DHI means dairy herd improvement system, and this is just that every cow is tested every month, and you take a milk sample from every cow, you measure how much milk it produces, and then you send a milk sample for fat, protein, and other content for testing. And this DHI is the basic of doing all the genetics. The bulls are selected out of these data that is collected from all cows in an area, and this is very crucial for good breeding industry. But these milk samples can also be used for a somatic cell count as a white blood cells that goes down to the udder. This is somatic cell count, or you can use it for PCR testing. Of course, it's not a sterile milk sample, but if you have Mycoplasma bovis or some of the other contagious bugs, they are good for PCR testing. That's what they do a lot in Canada. They test on DHI samples. Then you can run diagnosis on the farm. You can do culture or testing directly on milk samples in your farm, but you can also do milk performance and dynamic testing to show that the milk machine are running perfect. And of course, you can look at the cows and see if they are clean and dry and happy cows. Prevention, depending on the bugs, you decide a 5-point plan or clean cows. So how can the qPCR help you? Of course, if you don't get mastitis, your cows have higher production. If you have better milk quality, you get better payment from your dairy company. Generally, in most areas, there are areas where they don't focus that much on the milk quality, but most of the time, farmers are paid more on good milk quality, or at least they know that good cows produce much milk. And this is what the farmer like. So they like big production. And then, of course, if you know the box, you can do prudent use of antibiotics. Actually, if you test a lot of cows before you do treatments, you don't need to test half of those cows, treat half of those cows. It is unnecessary. As I told you before, they can be negative in bacteria. They can have very low numbers of gram-negative bacteria, and they are not. You don't need to treat these cows, so you can save half of your treatments, and it puts a lot of effort away from the milkers that they only have problems with half to treat half of the cows.
We just have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have comparison with lateral flow assays?
Flow assays?
Yeah.
No. I don't know how common I've seen some flow assays where they've tried to differentiate the different bacteria targets, gram positive or gram negative, but the flow assays, I have not seen any flow assays that's really good for individual where they have shown very good results on individual bacteria testing. Is that a possibility? I'll be very happy if you'll send some information on the lateral flow assay, but in my mind, it is not so sensitive that you can actually pinpoint the different bacteria targets as we can with the qPCR. The qPCR is much more accurate, at least in all the investigations I have seen so far. But we are always happy to get more information. Although we try to go to all the conferences and keep in contact with the well-known mastitis people, there's always new things coming up. And I saw Bentley trying to use these flow assays, if that is, but it was still on what do you call, on the development steps. So reduce antibiotics for treatment if you test before. And if you select cows for dry cow therapy, you can also actually reduce a lot of antibiotics if you do selective dry cow therapy. Back to our different test editions. On your left side, you see all the target bacteria that we detect. You might miss someone you think is more needed, but these are the ones we selected. It takes some time to develop new testing, so I'm not sure we can fit it for. But if you have many test possibilities, of course we might be able to add something to it. We do have two tests, the M4S and the M4M. The M4M is detecting bovis and species of mycoplasma. These tests, they only have two filter, or need two filter, and then the internal control. So they can run on 3 filter machines. So actually you can use some of our tests for other thermocyclers than the ones that I showed you. If you only want to use the M4M, then you can do this on other thermocyclers also. Then we have additions, as I told you, for the contagious pathogens. The M4E, which is highly sold in Canada and Spain and Italy, different areas. We have one kit. The first kit was developed for major pathogens: Aureus, Agalactia, Dysgalactia, and Ubris. Also, another very commonly used is M4B, where we have the Aureus, Agalactia, mycoplasma, bovis, and then the strep ubris. So we have made different editions depending on your area, and there should be also a one for you. And of course, if you only have 2 targets, it's a cheaper test. If you can do it with 4 targets, it is okay. But if you need to do it 16 targets, then of course it will be a little more expensive. I have highlighted the B, the D, the F, and the T. This is because this is what is in the BDFT issue here. So if you want 16 targets, you only do one extraction. And as I told you before, after one extraction, you do have a lysis product of 60 microliters. You only need 5 microliters to run the B test. Then you take another 5 microliters to run the D test, and another 5 microliters to run the F test, and then finally another target 5 microliters to run the T test. So if you only have 24 samples or 23 samples, if you have less than 24 samples, you can actually run these in one cycle with your thermocycle, because you can have 24 with the B, 24 with the D, 24 with the F, and 24 with the T running in your thermocycler in one test time. So then you can do the extraction, the lysis, and all the testing in the thermocycler in 3 hours, if you have less than 24 tests. If you have more than 24 tests, you will need more machine time to run the qPCR, depending on how many machines you have. Of course, if you have 4 or 5 thermocyclers, you can run 96 samples in 1 hour if you have 4 machines. Okay. Is this understandable, how this test editions is put together and how you select the qPCR? Okay. When you
we have a question.
Yeah.
What is the flow work for the 16 targets assay?
The flow work is actually the same. You do the first extraction step, which is always the same for all the testings. So you do the same extraction, you do the same lysis. So the first two hours of the testing is the same, and then you have your 60 microliters of qPCR, and then you take 5 microliter and load the different qPCRs. So depending on how many samples you have, you can do that it only takes 10 minutes to fill the qPCR, and then you can run all 24, or you can run 4 times 96 qPCR testings. So if you only have one thermocycler and you want to run 96 samples, you need to do 4 times of the 52 minutes or 1 hour thermocycle time. So there will be more machine time, but the filling, the manual work is only 5 minutes every time you have to change. Okay. The PCR test is heavily used in bulk tanks, as I told you, for the surveillance of contagious mastitis, Mycoplasma bovis, Agalactia, Staph aureus, Prosotheca, something you want to get rid of if you handle good cows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
And that is, so how many assays do I have to run for each sample?
How many assays you need to run? You only need to run one assay. When you think of assay, do you need one when you buy one test kit? When you buy one test kit of the M4 BDFT, which is a 16 target test, then everything is there for you. You do one extraction, you do one lysis, and then you add the qPCR into the 4 qPCR targets. So it all comes in one. So one kit is one full test of the 16 target.
So we just have another question.
Yeah.
Can you explain about pooling strategies
Yeah.
depending upon different herd sizes?
Yeah. We well, there was a question about pooling, and I'll take that into the next step, because big pooling is bulk tank testing, because then you pool all the cows you have in one farm. If you do fresh cow testing means that you test cows just after calving. These are the cows we call fresh cow testing. And fresh cow testing, you also want to test them for contagious mastitis, so that you know if the cows are infected, and you put them in the infected area where they can go for slaughter later on, or if they are clean, they can go to the clean cows and live happy ever after, and then you can continue milking without being interrupted by a lot of mastitis problems. These fresh cow testing is generally for Mycoplasma bovis, Strep agalactia, or Prototheca aureus, the contagious pathogens. These fresh cow testings might sometimes, in some areas, be used as pooling, where generally we do recommend no more than 5 samples or 5 cows being pooled into one testing. Actually, we do have a paper in our literature that we sent to you afterwards, where the people in Estonia, they did pooling of 5 or 10 cows, and it is working perfect, but you might have a little reduced sensitivity in your testing. So it's all depending on how sensitive you want your screening to be. But you can pool 5 or 10 cows, and then, of course, if one of the pools are positive, you test the individual cows to do this. So this is a good way to do this and save some money. Excellent. Okay. And the pooling of the fresh cows, we covered that. And then you have, of course, the somatic cell count cows that could be found in the DHI system. You have mastitis cows, where you see that they are sick, or they have a high somatic cell count, or they have flux, white clots in the milk. And you say, should I treat it? No, test it. You test it with a qPCR, and then you know you might only need to treat half of them. And the same goes for the dry cow therapy. If you do selective dry cow therapy, you can use the qPCR to select prudent use of antibiotic. Yes? Keep not infected cows not infected. That's what it's all about. Clean environment, clean teats, and then you will get good milking and good milk quality and less mastitis. You might have DHI labs that say, we know what's going on in your farm. We know when a farm have problems. Yes, they can tell you that you have problems with somatic cell counts, or they can tell you that you have problems with total bacterial count. But they don't know how to tell you what to do about it. So farmers will get somatic cell counts. Farmers will get total bacterial counts on the bulk tank. But if they have problems with high values, they don't know for sure what to do about it. Of course, you can always tell them to do everything correct. But this is problematic. It saves a lot of advisory time, and if you can tell them you should focus on this area or this area or that area. So if you have high somatic cell count in your bulk tank, and you do a qPCR on the bulk tank, and they tell you that this test tells you that you have a lot of problems with Staph aureus, then you can tell the farmer that you have contagious problems. You should do better milking. You should focus on the 5-point plan. You should teat dip, and you should do some segregation. Then you know exactly what to tell the farmer. The advisors, the vets, and the farm advisors, and of course the managers in the big farms, they know what actions to take if they know the bacteria that they have to to defeat or combat. The same goes for the high total bacterial count. Many people think this is only a cooling problem, but it is actually also a lot of times the cows with streptococci, or it could be shit from the environment that gives you high total bacterial counts. So when you do the TPC4 testing, then you tell the farmer what's wrong. So the farmer advisors, they know what to do for prevention if you have tested with the qPCR. This I have covered, prudent use of the antibiotics. And what about resistance test? I did tell you a little about resistance testing. It is not a big issue, although it has been a focus area for 10, 20, 40 years in a lot of countries. But the more you do resistance testing, you will focus on using a lot of strange antibiotics. As long as you know the bugs to treat, then you'll try to do it more simple and more easy, and then go for the gram-positive bacteria and treat them with narrow-spectrum antibiotics. And for the mastitis cows with environmental infections, with strep uberis, E. coli, the gram-negatives, you might know that you don't need to treat them. This has also been confirmed by the professors at the university departments in Cornell, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So it is universal. You don't need these individual antibiograms, sensitivity testings to do treatment correctly on each cow. Knowing the bug is the way to do it. Of course, you can screen for MRSA of some of the other genes that you are not interested in your bulk tank, but that's another issue for the public opinion. Advice to the farmers: if you know the bugs, you know what to do. People with mycoplasma know what to do with the mycoplasma, segregation, everything, and Staphylococcus, as I told you, 5-point plan, good milking, teat dipping, dry cow therapy, and so on. Environmental bacteria, Strep uberis, Enterococcus, E. coli, Klebsiella, clean cows, and clean cows. And Strep agalacta, Dysgalactia. This is skin condition. This is generally wounds and winter and wind and tear on the skin makes it cracking, and you will get more infections with Dysgalactia. So when you know the bugs, you can also introduce the farmer to a farm-specific prevention plan. I hope this is clear. That's where the issues of knowing the bugs are so important. 5-point plan is just the way that they can do it, and this is not for you to discuss and do lectures on, and not for me to do lectures on these subjects to the laboratory and so on. This is what the laboratory people and the vets in the area, they know all this, but this is for you to understand that it is so important to know the different bugs, because different bugs need different actions. So that's why focusing on a good test is crucial. And for the environmental, as I told you, it was just clean cows, and clean cows. So the benefits of qPCR is that you can do the individual farm plan. You can take bulk tanks and make for surveillance. You can do individual farm composite samples. It's a mixture of 4 teats. The milk from 4 teats is a composite milk sample. Or you can test clinical cows or the fresh cows. So there are different attack ways to go with your testing program, depending on the country and what your farmer and vets are are focusing on in your farms. But the test can be used in all these areas. Even if you mix from the DHI, high somatic cell count cows, you can say that this is a sample that comes out from the milking machine, and of course it's not aseptical, it's not sterile, so it's not aseptically taken milk sample. There will be some yeast and something on the sides of the milking machine that will influence the result. But if you test only for contagious pathogens, it's a good way to use these DHI, because it's very easy to get hold on the milk sample, and you get a good screening of your contagious problems. And of course, you can also take aseptically taken samples from each teat, and this will give you a good result. Some areas, they might say that PCR always find something in the milk sample, and that's because many of them have been testing in these DHI samples, and that's, of course, you will get some background. Whereas if you do these aseptically samples, we did that in USA in 2,000 samples, and we found more than 25% of the samples were actually fully negative, blank negative. I have covered this with the bulk tank testing, but mostly for the contagious bacteria, but also for the strep uberis surveillance or Klebsiella surveillance. Bulk tank testing is a perfect tool. We have a paper from Italy coming out that we will ship to you, where they highlight this, and you can see the different. Staph aureus was found in mostly half of the farms, and Agalactia in 10% of the farms, and Mycoplasma bovis is around 1.5%. This is actually the case in many areas, that 1 to 2% of the cows are infected with the Mycoplasma. Shortly on total bacterial count, as I told you, many areas will say that this is a Pseudomonas problem, so a cooling problem, and you have to do cooling investigations and check the cooling and the milking machine. But it can come from the cows, it can come from the environment, it can come from the feeding. So that's why we have selected these 4 target areas: Streptococci, the cows; Pseudomonas, the milking, cooling; Enterococci and Enterococcus, Enterobacteriaceae from the bedding, and Bacillus clostridium from the feeding. So when you know that this one was high, you should not call the milking technicians. You should focus on and discuss with the vets how to get rid of these Streptococci infections. Or if this is a problem, you should call the service technicians and say that the cooling is not perfect. Something has to be done. Now you know what to tell the technician and where they have to do their highlight their investigation. This was a farm that I visited, where they had focused a lot on cooling for 2 to 3 months and did not have any good success. So they did send us some bulk tanks before we went down there. And of course, you could see here that this was strep uberis. Most of the bacteria in the bulk tank was caused by strep uberis. So it is a strep uberis problem. So it had nothing to do with cooling. It was the shitty cows that they had to clean. And when we focused on that area, they had a very, very nice total bacterial count after that. So total bacterial count screening on the bulk tank will give you an idea on where to search for failures. So this was the bulk tank testing. The quadriceptical, I have covered that. Of course, if you know the mastitis case before you treat it, then you know that you can reduce the number of cows that had need treatment. the mixing of the composite milk samples was tested in Norway, where they compared culture and PCR on samples that were taken aseptically from all 4 quarters of the cows. And as you can see, the test with culture showed that they only found 6.4%, whereas in the PCR result they found nearly double as much. So the sensitivity of the qPCR is, for at least for some of the bugs, much better than culture. You will find a lot of cows that have very low number of bacteria, and they are positive with the PCR, and they are negative in culture. Okay. And then quarter sample, aseptically quarter sample, as I told you, find the right cows to treat. qPCR has a higher sensitivity. The fresh cows, you get fast mycoplasma results, and the non-infected cows can go to the good milking area. And this also brings me to tell you that you might have cows where you, if you focus on the bacteria, that you say these cows are not, we don't need to treat these cows. This can influence on the vet's income on the farm. So many areas, the vets are paid by the number of treatments they do. So the vets want to treat all the cows that you select for mastitis. So they might not be interested in reducing the treatments with 50%, because it takes out 50% of their income, because they earn money from each treatment, and some of them only earn money on the medicine that they sell to you, to the farmers. So there are conflict areas out there, and it's highly depending on the country how these has to be tackled. But it's just to give you an example that it might not be that easy to convince the local vet, because he might lose money. Okay? Oh, that's just the way it is. As long as you say that you want to serve the farmer, you want the farmer to have more milk, you want the farmer to earn more money, this is a talk they want to hear, the big farmers. The DHI samples, we talked about that. You can use it, it's heavily used in Canada, and you can use it on cows that you select. If they have more than, let's say, 200,000 somatic cell counts, you check them for contagious pathogens, and then you might need to segregate them, or you can in some cases also try to treat them. The Canadians have also advertised with this for us on Twitter and told about the Mastitis test. A little about swapping. Some people want to swap milking machines, areas around the milking area where they want to know if this is full of mastitis bacteria. Here you can dip the swab in this blue agent with Bonapol, and then you swap a 10 times 10 centimeter area, or you swap inside the liner, and then you put it back, and there's a silicate in here that dries out the swab. This is a good way to send samples if you are in an area with cooling problems, very hot areas, and if you have a long shipment distance with the post or collecting of the samples, it is very good to use this instead of sending the milk sample, because the bacteria will grow in many cases. Even though you might add Bonapol, a preservative, to the milk sample, something will happen if they are in 20, 40 degrees over just 3, 4, 5 days. So here you can take a good sample with the swab. You can do the individual. You can do the screening with the swabs in the tubes, in the liner, or in areas on the milking machine, or you can also do some individual bedding control with our test, so that you can focus: is my bedding full of Klebsiella? Do I need to do more cleaning and so on? Then you follow this protocol to find and test the bedding. Just in short, a little about the different bacteria. First of all, to show how bad Mycoplasma is and why it is so important. If you look at the calves in the Mycoplasma area, they have lung infection and they die of diarrhea. They have ear drops, they have ear problems, and they are really sick. This could look like a good cow with a good udder, but actually the milk is really bad. And the udder is hard. It goes to all the 4 quarters, and it's really bad, really bad milk quality. And the cow will suffer and stop produce milk. They have lameness. We had outbreaks in 2011 in Denmark where more than 20% of the cows in a farm was killed by just simply animal welfare issues of lameness, swollen legs, swollen joints, and also sometimes really bad cows that stop eating. And of course, this cows was euthanized as soon as I took the picture. So, yeah.
You should just say how many slides are left.
Yeah. We finished now. We finished now. 1 or 2 slides.
And then 5 minutes for me.
The conclusion: the somatic the Mycoplasma issues were around 1 to 2%, and I covered the pictures to tell you how important it is. And these were Mycoplasma pictures. And if you focus on the Strep Agalactia, if you do the segregation, if you do it correctly, you can reduce the number of total somatic cell counts heavily just in doing the segregation of the non-infected cows, and then have a good milk quality very fast in some of these farms. And this also goes when you focus on Prototheca. So this was our last slide. Simply have a good udder health and clean cows, and then hopefully some of the tests that we offer you will be of service to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, Jørgen.
No problem.
Thank you, Jørgen.